My son sold his house and handed his wife $650,000 as if it were pocket change. She spent it like water, and when the money started vanishing, they showed up at my door with a moving truck, assuming they could simply take over my home. I told them no. That morning, my daughter-in-law slapped me across the face in front of half the neighborhood. I went inside, still stinging with humiliation, and called my lawyer. Hours later, when they held the court summons in their hands, their arrogance collapsed into panic. Before we go on, make sure you subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if your own child sold his house, wasted $650,000, and then tried to force his way into your home? The phone rang just as I lifted a forkful of grilled chicken and peas, Linda's old recipe that never quite tasted the same when I cooked it myself. I sighed, set the fork down, and reached across the table for the old landline. "Dad, I have incredible news." Daniel's voice spilled out with that forced cheer I had come to recognize. I frowned. "What is it, son?" "We sold the house," he said, his tone crackling with excitement. $650,000. Can you believe that? The market is insane right now. I nearly dropped the phone. The bite of food stuck in my throat, and I coughed until my eyes watered. "Wait. What did you say? You sold the house?" Daniel laughed, as if it was something to celebrate without question. "Yeah, we got way more than expected. Cash buyers, no inspection, everything went smooth. It happened so fast I pushed myself up from the table, walking into the living room where Linda's portrait sat above the fireplace. My chest felt tight. "Daniel, when did this happen? You never said a word about selling just last week," he said casually. In the background, I heard Amanda's voice, sharp and commanding. A car door slammed, and traffic roared faintly through his phone. "We could not pass up the offer, Dad. We figured you would be happy for us," my voice cracked. "Where are you going to live now?" A pause, long enough for me to know he had not thought that far ahead. Then he said, "We will figure something out. The important part is, we made a profit. Amanda already has ideas for what we can do with the money." I sank into the recliner, staring at Linda's smiling eyes, frozen forever in that walnut frame. "Ideas? What kind of ideas?" Daniel chuckled nervously. "You know Amanda. New furniture, a luxury car, maybe that spa vacation she's been talking about. She deserves it, Dad. She stood by me through everything." My hand shook against the receiver. "Daniel, what about the $250,000 I gave you for that house?" That was my retirement money silence. Not static, not noise, just silence. Then he cleared his throat. "Dad, you gave us that money. That makes it ours. You cannot call it back now." The words stabbed through me. My eyes flicked back to Linda's photo, hearing her voice in memory. "Daniel has a good heart, Richard. He just needs steady guidance." "Daniel," I said slowly, "that was a loan. You promised me you would pay me back when you could. Promises?" His laugh was hollow, unfamiliar. "Come on, Dad." That was just talk. Families do not keep track of things like that. You are not hurting for money. You have the pension, Mom's life insurance, the big house. You will be fine. I stood, pacing toward my study. "You swore you would return it. I have the records right here. I took that money from my retirement account because you said it was for your dream home. Dad, just let it go. You have always told me family sticks together. That is all we are doing, helping each other. You should be happy we came out ahead helping each other." My voice cracked into anger. "What about helping me? What about your word?" "Look, I cannot do this right now," he said abruptly. "Amanda is waiting in the car. We have things to do. Thanks for being supportive." The line went dead. I stood there with the dial tone buzzing in my ear, my hand trembling so hard I could barely set the receiver back in its cradle. My study smelled faintly of paper and dust as I pulled open the drawer that always stuck, the one where I kept my most important documents. Out came the folder. Retirement account withdrawal, bank slips, the thank you card Daniel and Amanda had given me, still tucked inside. "Dad, you are the best. We will pay you back every penny. Love, Daniel and Amanda." The handwriting was Daniel's same hurried scrawl, the one that had filled school notebooks and Father's Day cards. I stared at the words until they blurred into ink smudges under my lamp. Outside, cold rain tapped against the shingles. The sound filled the empty house where Linda's laughter used to echo. That day in 2020, when Daniel had begged me for help, the sun had been shining. I could still picture it. He and Amanda sat at my kitchen table, her hand draped across his arm, both of them painting dreams of the house they wanted. "Dad, it is perfect," Daniel had said, bouncing his knee nervously. "We are 250,000 short. It is the only thing standing between us, and our future Amanda had chimed in with practiced sweetness. Please, Mr. Collins. We would not ask if we had any other option. We just need this one boost. I had been pouring coffee. The smell of it had filled the room. I had looked at their hopeful faces and felt pride that I could help. Linda would have told me to do the same. Of course I had agreed. Daniel had hugged me that day, his relief so real it had made me smile. Or so I thought. Now, 3 years later, I saw that hug for what it was. A transaction, a means to an end. The folder in my hands felt heavier than paper. It felt like evidence of my own gullibility. I slammed it shut and poured myself a glass of scotch, the amber liquid burning down my throat. I walked back into the living room and stood at the window. Across the street, I saw Mr. Peterson walking his dog under an umbrella, his porch light glowing warm against the rain. Ordinary lives. Honest lives. People who probably never imagined their children would betray them. My hands clenched into fists. Daniel had laughed at my trust. Amanda had planned her luxuries with my sacrifice. And both of them had dismissed my dignity as if it were disposable. I was still standing there when the rumble started. At first, I thought it was thunder rolling across the Ohio sky. But then, headlights cut across my driveway. A moving truck pulled up. Behind it, Daniel's car stopped with its trunk wide open, suitcases piled inside. The pounding on my front door began, loud and insistent, shaking the oak frame. I stumbled into the hallway, heart racing. Through the stained glass, I could see Daniel's tall figure shifting from foot to foot, Amanda right beside him, a suitcase handle gripped in her manicured hand. The early winter air seeped through the cracks, sharp enough to sting my bare arms under my robe. I opened the door just enough to block their entry. "What are you doing here?" Daniel grinned like this was some kind of joyful surprise. "Dad, we are here. We brought our things. Just until we figure out the next step." Behind him, the moving truck's engine idled, headlights flooding the driveway. Amanda adjusted her coat collar, diamonds catching the porch light. Her eyes scanned my house as if she already owned it. "You cannot be serious," I said, my voice low but steady. Amanda smirked. "Of course we are serious. Where else would we go? Hotels cost too much. You have plenty of room in this big place. You are alone. It only makes sense." I tightened my grip on the doorframe. "No, this is my home. You made your choices." Daniel's smile slipped into irritation. Dad, do not be selfish. Family helps each other. That is how it works. He pushed lightly against the door, testing my resistance. Do not push me, Daniel, I warned. You sold your house. You wasted $650,000. Do not think you can waltz in here and treat my home as your safety net. Amanda's voice cut through the night, sharp as broken glass. We are family. You cannot just turn us away. What kind of father does that? The curtain in Mrs. Alvarez's window across the street shifted. Mr. Peterson had stopped at his mailbox, watching openly now. I could feel the weight of my neighbor's eyes, their ears catching every word. Get off my porch, I said firmly. You are not moving into this house. Amanda scoffed. Listen to yourself. You sit in here alone with your photographs and your dusty furniture while your own blood freezes outside. You owe us. Owe you? My jaw clenched. I gave you $150,000. You promised to pay it back. You sold the house and burned through the rest. That debt is still yours. Daniel's tone grew colder. There is no debt. There never was. You gave us that money, Dad. Stop pretending otherwise. The neighborhood had grown quieter, the idling truck rumbling like a drumbeat beneath the tension. Even the Harrisons, who usually kept to themselves, were standing near their hedge, arms crossed, watching. You will regret this, Daniel hissed. One day you will be sick, and you will need us. Remember this moment I met his eyes, searching for a trace of the boy I had raised. All I saw was entitlement and resentment. Is that a threat? I asked. It is reality, Amanda snapped, stepping forward until her perfume curled into my nose. Her face was inches from mine, her expression twisted with disdain. You will beg us to come back. You will not last in this house alone. I refused to step back. Leave, I said, my voice firm. Now. Amanda's hand moved so quickly, I barely registered it until the sting exploded across my cheek. The slap cracked in the air, echoing down the quiet street like a gunshot. My head snapped sideways. For a moment, I stumbled against the frame of the door. The burn on my skin was nothing compared to the humiliation of being struck by my daughter-in-law in front of half the neighborhood. Hey! Mr. Peterson's voice barked across the street. He dropped his newspaper and started forward, his dog barking furiously at his side. Amanda smirked, her chest rising with triumph. Daniel grabbed her arm, muttering something under his breath. But she jerked free and pointed a finger at me. You are a selfish, bitter old man. You will regret this for the rest of your life. They stormed back toward the car, their suitcases tossed carelessly into the trunk. Daniel slammed it shut so hard the entire car shook. The moving truck driver, who had been watching from his cab with wide eyes, quickly started the engine and backed down the driveway. Tires screeched against the wet pavement as my son and his wife sped off into the night. The neighbors did not scatter. They lingered. Mrs. Alvarez had stepped onto her porch, her arms folded, her face stern. The Harrisons stood shoulder to shoulder near their hedge. Mr. Peterson reached me first, his brow furrowed with concern. Richard, are you all right? He asked, glancing at the red mark across my cheek. I touched it gently, the sting already fading, but the humiliation cutting deeper. You saw it? Every bit of it, he said firmly. So did half the block. That was not a family squabble. That was assault, the word hung between us, heavier than the cold rain that pattered against the roofs. Assault. Behind him, Mrs. Alvarez called out, If you need witnesses, I will testify. The Harrisons nodded silently, grim expressions replacing their usual politeness. My chest rose and fell with something harder than sorrow. For 35 years I had raised Daniel, given him everything I could, believed in him. And tonight, he had sent his wife to strike me on my own porch. Mr. Peterson put a steady hand on my shoulder. Do not let them make you doubt yourself. You stood your ground. Now you need to decide what comes next. What did come next? Just hours earlier, I had been a quiet widower eating Linda's chicken recipe alone. Now I stood in my doorway with a stinging cheek, half the neighborhood as witnesses, and a son who thought betrayal had no cost. I looked at the tire tracks smeared across my driveway, the last evidence of their attempted invasion. My jaw tightened. Amanda thought her slap had humiliated me into silence. Daniel thought his laughter had made him untouchable. They were both wrong. This is not over, I muttered, my voice more steel than I had heard in years. I closed the door slowly, the echo of Amanda's slap still ringing in my ears. My cheek throbbed, but the deeper ache was in my chest. The house felt different now. Less like a refuge, more like a fortress under siege. I moved to the study, flicked on the lamp, and stared at Linda's photo smiling back at me from its walnut frame. Her eyes seemed to ask the question I was already asking myself. How did it come to this? I pulled the manila folder back out of the desk drawer and spread its contents across the table. The papers lay there like evidence at a crime scene. Bank slips, withdrawal records, and that thank you card, still crisp despite the years. Dad, you are the best. We will pay you back every penny. Love, Daniel and Amanda. I ran a finger across the ink, tracing the words that once filled me with pride. Now they felt poisonous. The room filled with the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, steady as a heartbeat. My mind drifted backward, unbidden, to that spring day in 2020. The kitchen windows had been open, letting in the scent of lilacs from the yard. Sunlight streamed across the counter where I was making coffee. Daniel and Amanda sat at the table, faces full of nervous hope. Dad, Daniel had said, shifting in his chair, we found the perfect house. It is everything we dreamed of. But we are $250,000 short for the down payment. Amanda had leaned forward, her tone soft, practiced. We have tried everything. No bank will lend us that much. We would not be asking if we had any other option. I remembered setting the coffee pot down. Looking at them both, my heart swelling with pride that I could help. Linda had always said family came first. I had imagined her nodding in approval if she were still alive. Of course I had agreed. Daniel's face had lit up with relief. He hugged me tight, something he had not done since he was a boy. Thank you, Dad. I promise we will pay you back. Amanda's eyes had even filled with tears. She called me the most generous father-in-law in the world. I had believed them, every word. Now I stared at those same papers, realizing that moment was not gratitude at all. It was theater, a performance designed to pry open my heart and my retirement account. The scotch bottle on the shelf glinted in the lamplight. I poured a glass, the amber liquid catching fire as it burned down my throat. Everything burned now. The memories, the trust, the foolish pride I had once felt. I sat heavily in the leather armchair, staring at the folder. My late wife's voice whispered in memory. Do not let anyone walk on you, Richard. Not even family. Especially not family. I tightened my grip on the glass until my knuckles whitened. For years I had excused Daniel's selfishness. I told myself he would grow out of it, that Amanda's influence made him worse than he really was, that he just needed more time. But tonight, stripped away every illusion. They had wasted the money, tried to invade my home, humiliated me in front of neighbors, and Amanda had struck me. And Daniel? He stood there, smirking, letting her do it. I drained the last of the scotch and set the glass down with a firm clink. No more excuses. No more forgiveness without accountability. I rose from the chair and went to the locked drawer again. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a new resolve coursing through me. The key turned in the lock with a click, and I pulled out a second folder, one I had not looked at in years. This one was thicker, stamped with the name of my old friend and attorney, Charles. Inside were 8 neatly typed pages, dated and notarized. I unfolded them carefully, laying them flat under the desk lamp. Loan agreement. Principal, $250,000. Term, 5 years. Interest, 7%. Payment schedule beginning January 2021. Acceleration clause. Failure to pay for 90 days makes the full balance immediately due. Signed by both parties. Witnessed, sealed. Daniel's signature stared back at me from the last page. Bold, but hurried. The ink a little smudged. He had signed reluctantly. I remembered that day clearly. Charles had insisted on documentation, and Daniel had acted offended, as though contracts should not exist between family. But in the end, he signed. He needed the money too badly not to. I leaned back in the chair, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. Daniel thought he could rewrite history, call the loan a gift, dismiss his obligations. But paper does not lie. Signatures do not vanish. A promise written under law is still a promise, even when the son who signed it has no honor left. I whispered into the quiet room. You underestimated me, Daniel. The house creaked as if in answer, the old wood settling in the night. Outside, rain pattered against the porch where Amanda had stood hours before, hand raised in arrogance. Inside, the contract felt heavy in my hands, not just paper and ink, but a weapon. I could almost hear Linda's voice again. Fight for what is right, Richard. Being kind does not mean being weak. I straightened the pages and slid them back into the folder. My hand rested on it for a long moment, the weight of years pressing down on me. My son thought he had made a fool of me. But tomorrow, he would discover how wrong he was. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda's hand lashing across my face, Daniel's smirk just behind her, the neighbors watching from their porches. By dawn, the ache in my cheek had faded, but the burn of humiliation had only grown sharper. I poured myself a bitter cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the folder holding the loan agreement. The words on those 8 pages were no longer dry legal jargon. They were a shield, a sword, and a path toward justice. By 9 o'clock, I had Charles's number pulled up on the old landline. My hand hovered over the keypad for a moment. I had known him for 25 years. He had handled everything from our wills to a dispute with a contractor Linda once argued with. He was more than a lawyer. He was a trusted friend. Still, this call felt heavier than any I had ever made. The line clicked. Charles Harding speaking. Charles, it is Richard, I said, my voice low but steady. Richard, it has been a while. Everything all right? His tone shifted quickly when he heard the tightness in my words. What happened? I told him everything. The sale of the house, the $250,000 from my retirement account, Daniel's insistence that it was a gift, Amanda's slap on my porch in front of the neighbors. I spoke without pause, as if the story had been waiting years to pour out. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then Charles said, his voice cold and deliberate, Do you still have the loan contract? I slid the folder closer, laying my palm flat on it. Every page. Dated, signed, witnessed, notarized. All of it. Good, he said. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Richard, your son may think he is clever, but legally he has placed himself in a disastrous position. The loan is enforceable. The acceleration clause makes the entire balance due immediately. With interest, I calculate he owes you roughly $325,000. The number hit me like a splash of cold water. Daniel had called my generosity a gift. Amanda had mocked my trust, yet here was the truth, written in ink, stamped by the law. 325, I repeated, my voice steadier. At least, Charles confirmed. And that does not even touch the assault. Multiple witnesses saw your daughter-in-law strike you. That is not just a family squabble. That is actionable. We can pursue damages for emotional distress and public humiliation. Juries take a very dim view of an elderly man being attacked by a younger relative. I rubbed my jaw where the sting still lingered faintly. So, I have a case. You do not just have a case, Charles said. You have an ironclad position. I want you to bring me the documents today. Every page, every signature. We will start with a demand letter. 10 days to pay in full. When they fail to do so, we file in court. A slow, grim satisfaction spread through me. For the first time since Linda's death, I felt a sense of purpose. Charles, I said, my voice firmer, I will bring the papers this afternoon. When I hung up, I leaned back in my chair, staring again at Linda's photo on the mantel. You were right, I murmured. Kindness without limits is just weakness. It ends today. The rest of the morning passed in a strange calm. I gathered the documents, placing them carefully into a leather briefcase. I made copies, just as Charles had taught me years ago when I first started trusting him with legal matters. Always have backups, always be prepared. By noon, I was driving through the gray streets of our Ohio town, the briefcase on the seat beside me. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked older, harder. The slap had left a faint mark near my ear, but my eyes burned with something sharper than shame. Charles's office had not changed in years. Dark wood paneling, shelves stacked with law books, a heavy oak desk scarred by decades of use. He greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes narrowing slightly when he saw the faint mark on my cheek. You brought them? He asked. I placed the briefcase on his desk and opened it. The papers spread out like a battle plan. Charles adjusted his glasses and examined each page, his expression tightening with satisfaction. This is perfect, he said. Signed by both of you, witnessed, notarized. The terms are clear. The default clause is airtight. Richard, your son is in serious trouble. For the next hour, Charles walked me through the steps. The demand letter, the timeline for response, the lawsuit if he refused to pay, the damages for assault. Every word felt like armor being strapped around me. When he finished, he looked up at me with a steady gaze. Are you ready for this? I thought of Amanda's hand crashing across my face, of Daniel laughing at my trust, of the neighbors staring in shock as my family tried to invade my home. My jaw tightened. I am ready. Charles nodded once. Then let us begin. By tomorrow morning, Daniel will receive a letter that will shake him to his core. He thinks you are weak, Richard. He is about to learn just how wrong he is. I left his office lighter than I had entered. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were beginning to break, shafts of sunlight slanting across the streets. I carried the empty briefcase back to my car, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like I was carrying Linda's strength with me, her steady voice whispering in my ear. That evening, I sat in my study, staring at the loan agreement copy I had kept for myself. The words no longer blurred in sorrow. They were sharp, clear, undeniable. Daniel thought he had buried his obligations under arrogance and denial. Amanda thought her slap had silenced me, but both of them had underestimated me. I folded the papers and set them back in the drawer, locking it with deliberate finality. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Daniel's number. The line clicked after the third ring. "Yeah, Dad." His voice carried that same mix of dismissal and irritation I had heard too many times before. "Daniel," I said, my tone steady as steel, "I am demanding immediate repayment of the $250,000 loan you signed for. With interest, you now owe me $325,000. Full repayment is due silence, thick and stunned." Then a short, bitter laugh. "You cannot be serious." That money was a gift. There is no loan. I looked down at the 8-page contract in front of me, Daniel's signature bold on the final page. There is a contract. Signed by you. Witnessed, notarized, prepared by Charles Harding. It is binding, Daniel. His laugh cracked into something harsher. That paper is worthless. You cannot seriously think. "I think you owe me $325,000, I interrupted. "And if you refuse, I will see you in court." The silence on the line stretched. I could hear Amanda's sharp voice in the background, muffled but angry. Then Daniel spoke, his tone turning dark. "You're going to regret this, Dad. If you try to fight me, I will fight back harder." I jotted his words down on a legal pad beside me, my handwriting steady. "Every threat you make," I said calmly, "is evidence." "Charles will be very interested." The line went dead. I sat in the quiet study, the clock ticking steadily behind me. For the first time in years, I felt not like a victim, but like a man standing tall. My son had just declared war, and I was ready. I set the receiver down gently and stared at the phone for a long moment. The silence in the house felt charged, not empty. The red mark on my cheek had faded, but in its place was something sharper, harder, that would not go away. I opened my legal pad and carefully wrote Daniel's words. "You are going to regret this, Dad. If you try to fight me, I will fight back harder." Charles would want every detail. I wrote the time of the call, the exact phrasing, even the muffled sound of Amanda shouting in the background. For years I had been careless about Daniel's words, excusing them, forgetting them, smoothing them over. Not anymore. Now every word was evidence. The phone rang again less than an hour later. The caller ID glowed with Daniel's number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "What do you want?" I asked. His voice was already sharp, brittle. "You think you can sue your own son?" "Over money you gave me." "You signed a contract," I replied. "That contract means nothing. Families do not drag each other into court behind him." Amanda's voice rose, shrill and furious. "Put him on speaker. I want to say this myself." Then, louder, directly into the line, "You bitter old man. You think a piece of paper makes you powerful? You are pathetic. You are destroying this family." I held the phone steady, my voice even. "Amanda, every threat you make is being documented. Continue if you like." There was a pause, then Daniel's voice again, but less certain. "Dad, you are going to ruin everything. If you do this, you will never see us again." "I have heard that before," I said coldly. "This is not about seeing you. This is about justice. You owe me, and you will pay." The line went dead again. I wrote down their words, my hand steady, my heart no longer shaking with grief. Instead, I felt something like resolve coursing through me. When I looked out the window, I saw movement across the street. Mr. Peterson was standing in his driveway, his dog at his side, watching my house with quiet concern. He lifted a hand in greeting. I stepped onto the porch, the evening air sharp in my lungs. "Everything all right, Richard?" he called across. "They called again," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "Threats." More denial. "But I have the contract." His face hardened. "Good. Do not let them bully you. We all saw what happened Saturday morning. Mrs. Alvarez has already told me she would testify if needed. The Harrisons, too." "You are not alone in this," I swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over me. For years I had lived quietly in this house, polite nods and small talk with neighbors. Nothing more. Now, when I needed it most, they stood ready at my side. "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. "That means more than you know." He nodded firmly. "They crossed a line. You do not strike your father-in-law in front of a neighborhood and think there will be no consequences." I went back inside and closed the door. The house did not feel so empty anymore. It felt like a fortress, and for the first time, I felt like I had allies outside its walls. The next morning, I drove back to Charles's office. He greeted me with that same steady expression, the kind of look that told me he had already been preparing. I laid the notes from both phone calls on his desk. He read them carefully, his mouth tightening into something close to a smile. Perfect. Threats, denial, and an admission that the slap happened. They are panicking, Richard. This is exactly what we want. "What happens next?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I draft a formal demand letter, certified mail, 10 days to pay in full. Principal, interest, the entire balance, $325,000. When they fail, and they will fail, we file in court. We add a civil claim for the assault. Damages for emotional distress, public humiliation, and battery against an elderly man. With multiple witnesses, they will have no defense." The words washed over me, like armor being strapped tighter around my chest. "And if they refuse everything?" "Then we take everything," Charles said simply. "We seize assets. Wages, cars, furniture. They sold their house, but anything they bought with that money can be liquidated. They thought they were clever. But they left a trail. I thought of Amanda's diamond earrings flashing in the porch light, Daniel's new watch, the car parked in my driveway that night. Luxury bought with my sacrifice. "Do it," I said, my voice firm. Charles pulled a blank sheet onto his desk, his pen already scratching across it. "Consider it done. By tomorrow morning, Daniel will be holding a letter that leaves him no room to hide. He wanted a fight. Now he has one." I left the office with the faintest smile tugging at my lips. Outside, the gray clouds had parted and sunlight poured across the street. For the first time in years, I felt like I was not waiting for life to happen to me. I was taking control. That night, I sat at my desk, reviewing the copy of the contract under the soft glow of the lamp. Daniel's signature glared up at me, bold but sloppy, the ink smudged slightly at the edges. I traced it with a finger, not with sadness, but with something colder. That signature was my weapon now. That signature was the key. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. In the quiet of the house, I could almost hear Linda's voice again, steady and strong. "Fight for what is right, Richard. Being kind does not mean being weak." I lifted my pen and wrote on the top of a fresh sheet of paper, "Legal action against Daniel Collins." Below it, I listed Charles's timeline. Demand letter tomorrow. 10 days. Court filing after. Witness testimonies prepared. Assault damages added. The plan was in motion. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. For the first time since Daniel's call about selling his house, I woke without the heaviness in my chest. I ate breakfast slowly, the clink of the fork against my plate sounding steadier than the tremble of days before. By mid-morning, Charles had called to confirm. The demand letter had gone out. Certified, tracked, undeniable. Daniel would have it in his hands by the afternoon. I did not have to wait long. That evening, the phone rang, Daniel's number flashing across the caller ID. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before picking up. "Dad!" His voice cracked with panic, not the forced cheer from days ago. "What is this? This letter? It says I owe you $325,000. Full repayment? Are you insane?" I kept my voice calm even. "That is the contract you signed. It has always been due. The clock has simply run out, and in the background, Amanda shrieked, 'Put it on speaker!' I want to say something. Then her voice, sharp and cutting, filled the line. 'You selfish old man. You are suing your own son over money you gave him freely. You should be ashamed,' I scribbled her words, down on my notepad, the pen gliding easily across the paper. 'Amanda, every word you say is evidence,' I replied evenly. 'Continue if you wish.' There was a pause, and then Daniel again, his voice breaking. 'Dad, we do not have that kind of money. We cannot pay you, not all at once.' 'That is not my concern,' I said. 'You signed a contract. You are bound by it. 10 days. You will regret this,' Amanda spat. 'We will find a way to make you pay for what you are doing to us.' I wrote that down too, circling it twice. Threats. Exactly what Charles had said to expect. When the line went dead, I leaned back in my chair. The panic in Daniel's voice had been unmistakable. For the first time, I felt the balance of power shift. He had called me weak, predictable, a man too soft to fight back. Now he was the one scrambling, the one out of control. "The next morning, mister." Peterson knocked on my door, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. His dog trotted in circles around his legs. "Heard you got things moving," he said, lowering his voice. "The neighborhood is talking." "Talking?" I asked. "Mrs." Alvarez saw the certified mail truck stop at Daniel's place. Word travels fast. People know he got served. They know you are standing up for yourself. Let me tell you something, Richard. Folks respect that his words warmed me more than the coffee I sipped after he left. For decades, I had kept to myself, the quiet man across the street. Now, when I had drawn a line, the neighborhood seemed to rise behind me. That afternoon, Charles called. His tone carried quiet satisfaction. "Richard, I received a call from a young attorney this morning. Daniel's hired representation already. That tells me 2 things. 1, he is panicking, and 2, his lawyer knows your case is strong." "What did they say?" "They want to negotiate. A payment plan, maybe a reduced settlement." I told them we would hear their offer, but only in writing. Let them sweat, I smiled grimly. "Good." That evening, the phone rang again. Daniel's voice was raw, broken. "Dad, we cannot do this. We cannot give you that kind of money. We already spent most of it. Amanda bought the car, the furniture, the jewelry. We cannot undo that." "You should have thought of that before," I said. "Actions have consequences." Amanda's voice cut in again, venom dripping from every word. "You are nothing but a bitter old man, hiding behind a lawyer. You are weak. You think this makes you powerful? It makes you pathetic. I kept my tone calm. Amanda, you slapped me in front of half the neighborhood. That was assault. You should worry less about insulting me and more about explaining yourself to a judge. Her voice rose to a shriek. That was nothing. A slap is nothing. You are making it sound like I tried to kill you. My pen froze mid-sentence. Then I wrote the words carefully. Amanda admits to slap. Calls it nothing. Charles would call that gold. Daniel's voice came back, desperate now. Dad, please. Let us work this out. Just us. No courts, no lawyers. We can come to an agreement. We had that conversation already, I said. You called the contract worthless. You laughed at my trust. Now you will deal with the consequences. You are tearing this family apart, Daniel said, his voice cracking. No, son. You did that the day you chose greed over your word. The line went dead once more. I closed my notebook, staring at the stack of documented threats, insults, and admissions I had gathered over 2 days. Evidence. That word filled my mind. I had spent years making excuses for Daniel. Now I was building a case against him brick by brick. That weekend, Charles invited me to his office for a preliminary strategy session. His desk was covered in files, my contract on top. He tapped it once, firmly. This is your weapon, Richard, he said. 8 pages of promises Daniel cannot escape. Combined with the witness testimonies and Amanda's public assault, we are not just holding him accountable. We are cornering him. He has no way out, I nodded, the weight of the moment settling in my chest. He thought I was weak. He's about to learn you are not, Charles replied. When I left the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Outside, the air was crisp, the trees bare against the pale sky. For the first time, the quiet of my house did not feel empty. It felt like victory waiting to happen. The following week moved quickly. Charles drafted the court filing, but before it could be submitted, Daniel's attorney requested a settlement meeting. Charles explained it was a predictable move. Desperate clients often tried to soften the blow when they realized just how bad the case looked on paper. I agreed to attend, not because I expected fairness, but because I wanted to see Daniel squirm. The day of the meeting, I put on my best suit. The one Linda had always said made me look dignified. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in them. This was not about vanity. This was about walking into that conference room as a man who refused to be bullied, who refused to be painted as weak. Charles's office conference room smelled faintly of leather and coffee. The oak table gleamed under the lights. Across from me sat Daniel. Looking older than his 35 years. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled. Amanda was not with him, though I could see her fingerprints all over his posture, angry, defensive, ready to lash out. Beside him sat his attorney, a young man with nervous eyes and a stack of files he handled as if they might bite. Charles sat at my side, calm, steady, every paper in perfect order. The attorney cleared his throat. Mr. Collins, my client is prepared to offer a settlement plan. He acknowledges the money was given with expectation of repayment, though he disputes some of the terms. However, in good faith, he is willing to make a payment of $50,000 immediately, followed by $2,000 a month until the balance is cleared. I did the math quickly in my head. At that rate, it would take over a decade to recover the principal alone, not counting interest. I would be well into my 80s before it was done. Absolutely not, I said, my voice ringing across the table before Charles could speak. The young attorney shifted in his chair, clearly unsettled. Mr. Collins, please understand. My client has limited resources. The house money has been spent. He cannot possibly pay $325,000 all at once. Charles leaned forward, his tone crisp. That money was not spent on food or medical bills. It went to a luxury car, designer furniture, jewelry, and vacations. Purchases made in bad faith. Purchases that can be liquidated. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. You are trying to ruin me. I met his eyes, unflinching. No, Daniel. You ruined yourself when you betrayed my trust. I am simply holding you accountable. The attorney fumbled through his notes. Perhaps we can discuss alternatives. An apology for the incident on the porch, a symbolic payment. Charles's laugh was short and sharp. Assault is not symbolic. Mrs. Collins struck my client in front of multiple witnesses. That is civil liability. Damages will be sought. We are prepared to ask for an additional $50,000 for emotional distress and public humiliation. The young man's eyes widened. You are demanding $375,000 total? Charles slid a typed document across the table. Full repayment with interest, plus civil damages. 90 days to pay in full, or we proceed with seizure of assets and garnishment of wages. This is our only offer. Daniel's face turned crimson. This is impossible. You cannot take everything from me. You gave me no choice, I said quietly. You slapped away my kindness and mocked my sacrifice. Now the law will do what you refused to. The room went silent. The attorney read over the document, his face paling as he reached the final page. I need to consult with my client, he muttered, rising quickly and pulling Daniel into the hallway. Through the glass wall, I watched them. Daniel gestured wildly, his face twisted with anger. The young lawyer rubbed his temples, clearly overwhelmed. Charles leaned back in his chair. He is realizing just how badly he underestimated you. I exhaled slowly. Good. 10 minutes later, they returned. The attorney's voice was flat, resigned. My client cannot commit to these terms today. He requests 48 hours to consider. Charles nodded. He has them. After that, we file. No more discussion. We rose. Daniel glared at me, his fists clenched. You are destroying your own family. I held his gaze, calm and steady. No, Daniel. You destroyed it the moment you decided my money was yours to waste. I am only collecting what is owed. We left them in the conference room. Outside, the winter air cut sharp against my face, but I felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, I sat at my desk, Linda's photograph watching me as I poured a glass of her favorite wine. You would enjoy this, I told her softly. Our son finally learning that actions have consequences. The phone sat silent beside me. 46 hours left on the clock. I wondered whether Daniel would try to borrow from banks, sell Amanda's jewelry, or beg family members for help. It did not matter. For once, I was not the one scrambling. When the call came, it was precisely 46 hours later. I picked up on the second ring. Dad. Daniel's voice was hollow, defeated. We accept your terms. I let the silence stretch. He filled it quickly, his words spilling out. We had to sell the car, the furniture, Amanda's jewelry. We took loans against my salary. We will have the full amount within 30 days. All of it. Good, I said simply. That is all you have to say? He snapped. Yes. Amanda's voice echoed faintly in the background, sharp and bitter. Make him say more. Make him admit he is cruel. But I did not waver. Daniel, you will pay what you owe. Amanda will provide a written apology for the assault. And when this is over, you will rebuild your life the same way you will rebuild your relationship with me, if you even can. one honest action at a time over many years, with no guarantee of success. That is harsh, he muttered. That is reality, I said. The line went quiet for a long time. I could hear Daniel's uneven breathing, Amanda whispering furiously in the background, the muted slam of a door as if she had stormed out of the room. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice stripped of arrogance. We will have the money within 30 days. Every penny. I will send Charles the proof once we sell the last of it. Good, I repeated, and hung up. When I placed the receiver back in its cradle, I sat in the stillness of my study, my fingers brushing over the grain of the oak desk. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control. No shouting match, no guilt weighing on my chest, just clarity. Daniel and Amanda had spent years believing they could take and take without consequence. Now the consequences were staring them down. The weeks that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. I filled the days with small routines: coffee at dawn, walks around the block, a few conversations with Mr. Peterson across the street. He never pried, but I could tell he was watching closely, ready to step in if needed. Mrs. Alvarez came by one afternoon with a warm casserole. Just in case, she said softly. Her kindness reminded me that despite the betrayal inside my own family, there were still people who knew what loyalty meant. 29 days later, Charles called. His voice carried the same steady satisfaction as always. Richard, the transfer has cleared. Full amount. $375,000, principal, interest, and damages. It is done. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. It is done, I repeated, almost to myself. Check your account, Charles said. It is there. This is one of the cleanest victories I have seen in years. Daniel may not thank you for it now, but you have taught him a lesson that the world would have delivered far more brutally. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled the folder from the drawer one last time. Inside it was the original contract, the thank you card, the bank slips, and now, clipped neatly to the front, the transfer confirmation from the bank. A complete story, a record of promises made and promises broken, then finally enforced. That evening, Mr. Peterson stopped by with a bottle of wine. We sat on the porch, the winter air sharp against our cheeks, and watched the sun dip low over the neighborhood. He raised his glass. To justice, he said simply. I clinked my glass against his. To boundaries, I replied. We drank in silence for a while. The street was quiet, but I remembered the morning it had not been. The shouting, the slap, the neighbors frozen in disbelief. Now, weeks later, the same street carried only peace. Do you ever wonder if you were too hard on him? Mr. Peterson asked finally, his tone thoughtful. I considered it, the glass warm in my hand. I wondered that every day since this started. But no, I was not too hard. For years I was too soft. I let him take advantage of me because I loved him. I let Amanda treat me like a fool because I wanted to keep the peace. But peace without respect is not peace. It is surrender. And I am done surrendering. He nodded slowly. Your wife would be proud. The words struck me deeper than any slap could. Linda's photograph sat waiting in my study, her smile frozen in time. I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that she would have approved of what I had done. She had always told me kindness without boundaries was not kindness at all. It was enabling. Later that night, I sat in the study alone, Linda's photo in front of me. I lifted my glass in a quiet toast. We did it, Linda. He learned. Maybe not the way we hoped, but he learned. And the house was quiet, but it no longer felt hollow. It felt like mine again, my sanctuary, defended and preserved. Daniel and Amanda would rebuild, I was sure of that. Maybe years from now he would call, not for money, but for advice. Maybe Amanda would learn that manipulation had limits. Maybe. But whether they did or not, I had reclaimed my dignity. I had drawn a line and refused to let it be crossed. At 68 years old, I finally understood something I should have realized decades earlier. Love without accountability is not love. Family without respect is not family. And when you are pushed to the edge, even the quietest man can find his strength. The contract was paid. The lesson was delivered. And I was free. If you liked this story, please subscribe and tell us your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the screen.